Good. Good. Adequate notice, ladies and gentlemen, of this December the 22nd, 2014 meeting has been provided in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act by posting written notice and agenda of the meeting on the bulletin board in this municipal building, 1000 Route 10, Township of Hanover, and by hand delivering, mailing, or faxing such notice and agenda to the following newspapers: Morris County's Daily Record, the Star Ledger, Hanover Eagle, and by filing same with the Township Clerk. Have a roll call.
Committeeman Gallagher.
Here.
Committeeman Ferramasca.
Here.
Committeeman Bruno.
Here.
Committeeman Capola.
Here.
And Mayor Francioli.
Okay, ladies and
5
gentlemen,
members in attendance, sir.
please rise and join me in a pledge of allegiance to our flag. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Before, ladies and gentlemen, we open to the public, as is customary at this time, Township Committee asks us to call for a moment of silence for the 2 fallen police officers of Manhattan that took place these past few days. So, on that note, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for remembering them. Motion to open to the public for any items not appearing on the agenda. Motion is moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, the floor is open. It will be opened again toward the end of the evening, but anyone who would like to address the Township Committee, please do so from the podium and give us your name and address for the record.
Hi, Kim Landers, 11 Independence Drive in Whippany. I know I've been in touch with some of you about the speeding, mainly the high school students on the road. I know it was being discussed about speed bumps or what you guys were going to do from here, and I was wondering what came out of your discussion.
You want to Kim, what was exactly was discussed was a report that we got from our Chief of Police and our Traffic Control Officer. And by the way, we recognize the fact that there is a real issue here. And I'll tell you the steps that we're going to take, which may lead to speed tables at some point.
Okay.
Notice I just qualified that, but I'm going to tell you what we're going to do. The first recommendation that the chief has is something that we did successfully on Forest Way, and that is a striping system for the street, creating 2 lanes. So it'll be a defined stripe for the middle, and there'll be side lanes as well. What that has helped to do, what experience showed us in Forest Way, is that drivers who followed those lanes had to slow down in order to stay within the lanes. In conjunction with that, doing that immediately, Committeeman Bruno will be meeting with Mr. Manning, and a discussion with Mr. Manning on what this issue is with the permitted drivers that he has that have permits to use the school lots. And he's going to go over chapter and verse what we're doing, and he wants to hear from Mr. Manning as to what we can do cooperatively together to put this in control. Needless to say, police vigilance on the road will be increased, and we want to do that during those hours of schools being let out and schools coming in. And then we will monitor this, and if this is not successful in stopping this, and we have every reason to believe it'll be effective. If this is not successful, then the Township Committee is pretty much unanimous that we will go to speed tables.
Excellent.
As we have on McNabb, we have on Country Woods, etc., and we have a good record with the speed tables. But there's been 2 opposing issues here. I mean, there's families on the street that don't want speed tables, and we appreciate their point of view. And there are families that understand that they do want the speed tables, and we appreciate that point of view. So let's take this first step.
Okay.
Let's follow the recommendations of our chief and traffic officer. And by the way, that'll take place immediately. Our engineer tells us we might be able to do the striping. The weather is still in our favor?
Yes, it is.
Weather's still in our favor to get the striping done. And there has also been another suggestion by Member Gallagher, who's on our school safety committee. We have some digital signs, I think it is.
Yes.
that we can employ in the area.
Okay, good.
To make the students, make the drivers, whomever they are, aware of the speed limits in that area too, so we'll do that. So you've been good, you've been bearing with us to this point, let's see if it works. If it doesn't, I assure you, speed tables are the next step.
Excellent, thank you, everyone. I would like to thank the police department. They have been wonderful, but unfortunately, they can't be there every morning and every afternoon as it is. Another suggestion I had too is don't let them make a left out of the parking lot in the afternoon.
Oh, Bob, you want to make note of
I
that?
mean, I don't know if that's feasible, but that would stop them from speeding down the road in the afternoon. Make them make the right onto Whippany Road.
Okay.
And also the same thing about the speed limit. It's only posted like once on the road. Maybe that would help too, posting it more than once.
Additional postings
Additional,
along the
yes.
way, all right?
Yes.
Okay, it's a 25-mile-an-hour speed zone,
Yes.
school zone.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, all right, can do
Right.
that. Jerry, make a comment to
the police?
Brian?
Yes.
Yeah, for additional
Also-
postings?
Yes.
Mayor, don't forget, we also did the traffic study too. So it's giving them an idea of what areas they have to look at,
Okay.
okay?
All right, thank you, everyone.
Good, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Would anyone else like to be heard at this time? Joseph? Ah,
Oh, Mr. Amaducci, it takes me so long to get up. Can I go
Race
first?
to the podium.
Tom, he beat you.
You know, Mr. Amaducci,
He's not gonna
as I
sit
walked in, I said, I know that guy from somewhere. You're looking great.
Joseph, what
Yeah. 12 Anna Terrace, Whippany section of Hanover Township. I thank you very much for this opportunity to address you this evening. And I'd like to just start off with some kudos. Committeeman Capola, I read a letter that used police departments everywhere and whatnot. Very commendable. I think that was well written, well versed, and I wish more people get an opportunity to read it. Committeeman Bruno, you got a lovely daughter.
Well, I thank you very much, sir. Appreciate that.
Come out and in support of her dad. Really,
Unsolicited,
really good.
by the way.
And all of you gentlemen, I know where your hearts are. Your hearts are with this town. I would just like to make, we are going to be discussing or having open to the public 4414.
That's correct.
So we'll leave that for the moment. But just slightly touching on that, a number of months back, we rezoned a section on North Jefferson Road from R15 to R15A. We heard a number of promises and, yeah, we can do that, yes, we'll do that, yes, we'll do that. I don't know if any of you have had an opportunity to drive into the temporary access road that has been put in on Jefferson Road on the old, shall I say, slaughterhouse property. The elevation, which I had assumed when the proposals were put up, were going to be quite different than what they seem to be right now. I would just invite each of you, if you have not had the opportunity, to take a ride up North Jefferson Road and make a right onto the road that is temporary, and just look at what all of the promises that were made to the residents in that area and to you Township Committee have led to. It's a travesty. I think the elevation goes from 0 to about 10 feet high, which was, I don't recall ever being discussed. As a matter of fact, I thought it was completely different. This is a developer that keeps wanting to develop in this town. Be careful. But please, if you get an opportunity, just take a ride up that road, and you'll see what I'm saying.
Well, Joe, you can be assured I'll take a ride there, but I'm going to take a ride there with our engineer. Now, Jerry, you're monitoring the soils removal on that property and distribution? Are there submission of plans, have specific elevations, et cetera, throughout the site?
Well, we haven't seen an as-built from the road, but when the plan was approved, and that road did elevate out towards the back, because they had to get the drainage out towards the front, so that concept
Well,
of the back being
I
higher.
can elevate towards the front. It's also going to elevate to each side of the neighboring properties. Or
Right.
I say descend
Yeah.
to each side of the neighboring properties. A little drastic if you really take a look at it.
Jerry, you've got his plat plans in this.
Yes,
What do you say you and I take a ride, well, this week's gonna be difficult.
yeah, this
week.
week would be.
Joe, we'll be up there. Let's take a peek, and
Sure.
we'll see what's going on, okay? We'll take a look, Joe.
Thank you.
Tom, go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. Tom Amaducci, 27 Mountain Avenue, Cedar Knolls. I have some property on Rosin Road, which is adjoining the ordinance, the 4414 amending ordinance. And the one concern that I've got, I just need some explanation, I guess. One of the ordinance requirements is that all truck traffic will be entered to the town center zone through either Apollo Drive or Rosin Road. My property is
May I
7.
interrupt you with all due respect?
Yeah.
Those comments on 44 should come at the time.
We're gonna open the hearing.
do it? Okay, that's fine.
Should not come now.
Okay, I'll wait for that
Yeah,
then.
but that's
Yeah.
the proper time.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Okay.
Tom, we'll open that session for comment specifically. Anyone else like to be heard at this time?
Robert Steiger, 13 Quarter Place, Cedar Knolls. My first comment is that the municipal building looks beautiful. To see the crash and the manure out, I give you guys credit. A lot of towns are afraid to do it. I think it's wonderful what you've done. The building really does look spectacular.
Thank you for that.
Next, though, I got my sewer bill, and they were bragging about going up 3%. Mine went up 12% this year. It's gone up 50% since 2010. What is going on? They building a Taj Mahal there or what?
I don't think they're, first of all, Merry Christmas and thank you for coming out tonight, the Monday before Christmas. The sewer bill is basically, there's two components to
By
it.
the way, John is our liaison to HSA.
I figured that much, okay, yes.
There's a fixed element which runs the plant, and what they do is they try to use connection fees to pay majority of your fixed element. They also use bonds to pay for that. But the issue that a lot of homeowners incur in terms of increases, they may say that there was an overall 3% increase on average, but some people may get a lot more of an increase than others. And why they're getting it, the sewage bill is no longer a fixed amount of money. It's based upon actual water consumption.
Right.
It's not on your sewer consumption.
gotcha.
It's based upon the water consumption. And Bob's sitting there, listening to their meetings and people coming up talking about it. The majority of homeowners who experience increases in the sewage bill, it's a function of there's a leaky toilet.
Mike, you can't leak a toilet that much, I'm sorry,
Well-
my water bill has gone down the last, because it's just Dot and I and Robbie, with the 5 kids are gone. It's gone, the water bill has maintained the same for the last 10 years, but my sewer bill has gone up every year for the last 5 years.
I know that it's a function, actually what I would do, if you feel that the bill is incorrect, and I guess you do feel it's incorrect, go down there and say, here's my water bills, or show me the water bills, because they have access to the records. Show me why my bill is going up 10% if the sewage authority's increase was 3. And the only way I know it could go up, because I know you didn't put a new connection to your house.
Right.
You didn't build a connection fee. So the only other way it could go up above 3 is for increased water consumption. And the majority of the culprit of increased water consumption is it's a leaky toilet.
But wouldn't that be reflected in my water bill?
But your water bill.
Right.
But can I
Okay.
just add,
Yeah,
though,
it
I
should
think
be.
it's important to note that that's a separate autonomous agency.
Yes.
So, those, you certainly are the liaison, but this governing body has no control.
I
over what
understand
they
that,
do.
but the liaison should have enough information if
the
he goes
best
to the
place
meeting
to
to
find
know
out
what's going on.
No, but the best place to voice any concerns and questions would be right to the HSA, because they would have that data and information. I'm just saying that's the best way to get any, especially a specific answer to a question. I think that, that's what they're there for.
My recommendation is to, when you get a chance, contact Lauren in the HSA office, give them your property number, and just say, Lauren, would you please double check? And they'll be happy to do it. They'll be happy to do it. But listening to the issues with them, the majority of the culprits are toilets, which leak.
I understand. I sat there for 17 years. I know how the sewer authority works. My other now is, gentlemen, in 1999, the people of this town overwhelmingly supported the Open Space Trust Fund. It gave us 2 cents, I believe, towards every $100 or whatever it was. And you guys, I know you got into trouble a few years ago and you chopped the daylights out of it. You got it down to a half a penny. Please, you said last year you couldn't do anything wrong because you owed Lucent so much money. Please, guys, we can't do squat on the open space with a half a cent. We can't even look at pieces of property and decide maybe we'd like to get it. We offered $100,000 to people doing the trails because we wanted to be supportive of them. But please, when you get the budget time, please try to bring it back to at least a cent or a cent and a half. I ask you that, please.
You're absolutely correct in that several years ago, it was cut way back to a half a cent. And that was in conjunction with all of the debt issues that the township had. And
I understand
you know how
that.
Hanover feels about
Yep.
debt. But we were the largest in the county in tax appeals. Our CFO isn't here tonight, but if he was, I'd say, I'd give him a congratulations because last year we did a yeoman job of knocking down millions of dollars of tax appeals. And at the same time, we were able to put back $1.5 million back into road construction, reconstruction, and still deliver a zero tax increase to our residents.
It was wonderful. Mine actually went down a couple $100.
But let me say, and you've heard me on this, I'm still out after that for this coming year, a zero tax increase, and working backwards from that, what our infrastructure needs, and then at the end of the day, if we can add into the pot for open space. And by the way, we do expect in this coming year too some large amounts of incoming dollars to our tree fund, which by the way is beginning to diminish. Because of the lack of large. It doesn't mean that we should keep large projects coming in just to feed our tree fund, but we will have a significant amount of money to the tree fund, and the township committee, I'm sure, would want to look at what kinds of cash we have to put back into open space.
I appreciate
it. So you have my word on that.
Speaking of tree fund, the trees that they destroyed on the corner of Ridgedale and Hanover Avenue, has the town ever gotten anything for those trees?
Oh, yeah. Some $67,000 or $68,000.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I have questions on that ordinance that you're going to do, but I'll bring that up when the time comes.
Okay. Thanks,
you.
Bob. But, Bob, take John's advice, because several of my neighbors had taken their water bills into HSA, and it's based on gallonage, so it shouldn't be such a large jump over their increase. If your gallonage matches up with what they're charging you for the sewage, it shouldn't be as significant as you're saying. So take that advice and bring the bill in. They will look at it.
Bob, I went through the same thing when my grandson started living with us, and when I went there, I was shocked to realize how much extra he was using because of his 2-hour showers.
Teenagers.
Yeah.
It's the cost of everything. The floor is still open, ladies and gentlemen. If anyone else would like to be heard at this time. Hearing none, seeing none. Motion to close?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Mr. Administrator.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. At this time, ladies and gentlemen, we will proceed with the public hearing and consideration of adoption of ordinance number 44-2014, which, if adopted, would amend and supplement Chapter 166 of the Code of the Township, entitled Land Use and Development Legislation, by adding an alternative mixed-use development option for the TC, Town Center Zone District. For the record, we'll note that we have given adequate legal notice to the Morris County Department of Planning and Development in accordance with the New Jersey Municipal Land Use Law. And we have their notification that the ordinance was timely filed. We also have an affidavit which I have signed as the Business Administrator Township Clerk. Once again, in accordance with the Municipal Land Use Law, in that all persons residing within 200 feet of the property in question, within and without that property, have been given adequate notice by certified mail and regular mail of tonight's public hearing. We also have, again, in accordance with the Municipal Land Use Law, the ordinance was submitted to the Planning Board for referral and recommendation. And I have in my possession a letter dated December 9th, 2014, from the Chairman of the Planning Board, and I'm going to read this for the record. Dear Mr. Giorgio, at its December 9th, 2014 meeting, the Planning Board reviewed and discussed Ordinance 44-14, which have been referred by the Township Committee as required by the Municipal Land Use Law at NJSA 40:55D-26A. Ordinance 44-14 would amend Chapter 166 of the Code of the Township by amending the regulations for the TC Town Zone Center to permit an alternative mixed-use development option consistent with the historic use of the property, while also continuing to permit as an alternative development under the current zone standards. The alternative development option proposed by Ordinance 44-14 would permit a mixture of industrial uses, warehouses, offices, laboratories, data centers, child care centers, townhouses, and multi-family dwellings. Two elements of the master plan make specific reference to the TC zone: the land use plan element and the housing plan element. The Planning Board has reviewed Ordinance 44-14 with both plan elements and has determined that the ordinance is partially consistent and partially inconsistent with the master plan. Specifically, the Board the following. 1. Under the land use element, the land use plan element recommends that the TC zone provide for a planned commercial district with a range of retail and professional office space, restaurants, and public amenities. Inclusion of age-restricted housing is also recommended, subject to determinations regarding site remediation from the former industrial use. Ordinance 44-14 would continue to allow a planned commercial development that is substantially consistent with the land use plan. However, Ordinance 44-14 would allow an alternative mixed-use development containing industrial uses, warehouses, offices, labs, data centers, child care centers, townhouses, and multifamily residences. The inclusion of industrial, warehouse, and laboratory uses and the exclusion of retail and restaurant uses is not consistent with the land use plan. 2. The land use plan element recommends that non-residential development be limited to a floor area ratio of 0.15 or approximately 562,000 square feet of non-residential floor area. Ordinance 44-14 would continue to permit a 15% floor area ratio under the planned commercial district option, but in the alternative development option would permit or limit non-residential floor area to 455,295 square feet or a floor area ratio slightly under 13% of the zone. 3, the land use plan element recommends that the percentage of office or retail floor area not exceed 60% of the total non-residential floor area. Ordinance 44-14 would continue to limit both office and retail floor area each to not more than 60% of the total non-residential floor area under the planned commercial development option. Under the alternative development option, however, Ordinance 44-14 would not permit retail use and would not impose such a limit on office use. 4, the land use plan element recommends that the residential portion of the town center be designed as age-restricted townhouses, that such housing not exceed 40% of the land area of the district, and that the density not exceed 1.8 units per acre of the district, or approximately 155 total units. Ordinance 44-14 would continue to permit age-restricted townhouse units at a density of 1.8 units per acre of the district on land that does not exceed 40% of the area of the district, all within the planned commercial development option envisioned by the land use plan. Under the alternative development scenario, however, Ordinance 44-14 would permit up to 120 housing units, at least 100 units of which would have to be age-restricted, with at least 20 affordable units, all on not more than 11 acres, which represents 13.5% of the district. Now, under the housing plan element, 1, the housing plan element references the litigation settlement between the Township and River Park Business Center and recommends a mixed-use development, including affordable housing units, consistent with the settlement agreement. Ordinance 44-14 is intended to implement the zoning portion of the settlement agreement and is therefore consistent with the housing plan element. To summarize, Ordinance 44-14 is partially consistent with and designed to implement portions of the master plan, and is partially inconsistent with portions of the master plan. This is due in large part to the fact that the land use plan and housing plan elements of the master plan are not consistent with each other. Ordinance 44-14 would resolve the inconsistency with the housing plan, but create some inconsistency with the land use plan. The board has considered the alternative development scenario presented in Ordinance 44-14 and intends to seek an amendment to the land use plan that would resolve its inconsistency with the housing plan and Ordinance 44-14. As such, the Planning Board recommends the adoption of Ordinance 44-14 as introduced. Thank you for the opportunity to comment on Ordinance 44-14. Very truly yours, Robert Nardone, Chairman, on behalf of the Hanover Township Planning Board. We'll also note for the record that the notice on the introduction of the ordinance, with the ordinance being spread in full with the notice of introduction, appeared in full in the December 4th issue of the Daily Record in accordance with law, and we have an affidavit of publication for the record. Finally, we have a letter that is submitted by Shepard A. Gurian on behalf of River Park Center, Business Center Incorporated. The letter is dated December 19th, 2014. It is addressed to me as the Business Administrator, Township Clerk, and the letter reads in total as follows. Dear Mr. Giorgio, this office represents River Park Business Center Incorporated, River Park, the owner of the property which is the subject of the above referenced proposed ordinance, presently scheduled for consideration on December 22nd, 2014. River Park objects to the proposed ordinance number 44-14 and asserts that certain provisions thereof are arbitrary, capricious, illegal, and not rationally related to public health, morals, safety, or welfare. We note as well that the proposed ordinance purports to implement a certain settlement agreement between the Township and River Park entered into in or about 2008. River Park has repeatedly advised the Township since at least August of 2013 that in light of the Township's prolonged failure to perform its obligations under the purported agreement, River Park regards such purported agreement as abandoned and without any force and effect. Under no circumstances thereof should the Township adoption of proposed ordinance number 44-14 be considered fulfillment or performance of any alleged or purported settlement agreement. The within letter is written without prejudice to River Park's rights and remedies, including but not limited to the right to institute such action or actions as may be appropriate to challenge the existing zoning or some or all of the provisions of any proposed overlay zoning. Very truly yours, Shepard A. Gurian. And we'll note that for the record in full. Now, at this time, ladies and gentlemen, since we've met all our obligations under the municipal land use law to provide adequate notice to all the parties, I would ask for a motion to convene the public hearing.
So
at this
moved.
time.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Bruno, seconded by Mr. Capola. On roll call, Mr. Gallagher.
Aye.
Mr. Faramasca.
I also have a comment before we open this, Mr. Giorgio.
Mr. Bruno.
Aye.
Mr. Capola.
Aye.
And Mr. Franciola.
And
Aye.
if I may, Mayor, just from a procedural standpoint, I just want to point out two things. First, with respect to the protest filed by Mr. Gorian, who's the attorney for the River Park property, which is the subject of the rezoning. What that means under the municipal land use law is that an ordinance must be, it's a protest, so the ordinance can only be approved by a supermajority, which would mean 4 affirmative votes of the governing body. The second matter is the letter that was received from the planning board. The planning board rightfully has an obligation to render an opinion whether or not an ordinance is consistent with the existing master plan. And although there was a master plan amendment drafted a while back, it was not approved. It was a timing issue. It was not put forward because at one point the property owner had indicated they were going to file suit, so that particular master plan was withdrawn. So technically, there were certain issues raised in that communication from the planning board that says that part of the ordinance is, well, it's legal and it may serve a very good purpose and it may be consistent with a settlement of the parties. It's in some ways inconsistent with the master plan. So what that means is, if you were to adopt this ordinance tonight, you also have to adopt a resolution stating the reasons as to why this governing body still wishes to adopt the zoning ordinance. So after the public comments and the governing body's comments, then I spoke to the planner. He'll have enough information to put together a short resolution if you were to go in that direction to say, here are the reasons why, notwithstanding the points that are raised by the planning board, that the governing body seeks to adopt this ordinance. So we'll need that step in between to take as well tonight, and Blaze is aware of that.
Thank you, Fred. I know John wants to comment for a second, and the floor is open, but You just heard of extremely lengthy, extremely detailed, extremely legalized opinion of what's happening in the zone, and God bless you if you followed it all. Let me first say that this particular piece of property, the old Whippany paperboard property, since the 30s going forward, has been an industrialized use and mostly an abandoned use at this particular point. You have probably heard most recently many various concepts that have come forward, not just for this property, but for the South Campus, which is that property next to Bayer Corporation. The Township Committee, at its last meeting, as you might know, took such action on the South Campus as to retain the OBRL, Office Building Research Laboratory zone, which will not permit residential housing units in that zone. And by the way, I'm happy to announce that there will be a submission very shortly by MetLife Corporation, who will be taking a 200,000 square foot portion of the front portion for their flagship headquarters. They will be leaving their facility, which they lease on Columbia Turnpike. Having said all of that, brings us back to this particular zone, which you're going to hear more of a explanation on it. But let me give you a lay position on this thing. And I know you can't see this, but when you go back to the court settlement that we had, that attorneys are saying is now abandoned, I certainly differ with that, counsel. That court settlement provided that Hanover would get a front portion of the dam, some 22 acres above the dam, to be attached to our central park as open space. There is also a buffer area, which is known as the treatment plant portion of that property, which also would be given over to the township. The balance of that property was, in the court settlement, going to be given up to some 450 plus or minus flex buildings. To the layperson, what is a flex building? A flex building is a combination, 20% of the building being office, 80% of the building being warehouse, usually used by large corporations for warehousing or storage of their goods at the same time. The housing that you heard mentioned in this consisted of age-restricted housing in two buildings that the agreement talked about. The two buildings would be on that space above the dam, and those two buildings would have a total of 100 age-restricted units. We can talk about that in a second. Finally, there is an affordable portion which meets the COA requirements, Council of Affordable Housing. Let's not go there. And those 20 units, affordable units, are on a portion of the property I would describe to the western portion of the railroad track that's still owned by Whippany Paperboard. That's the sum of this. Now, as I say, you've heard so much about concepts that have come forward to cover this property with rental units and residential housing. The Township Committee is not about to, in my opinion, and unless I hear from other committeemen differently, and I don't think I will, is not about to consider that at all. And we wish to put in place, and with council's recommendation and advice at this point, we want to put in place the correct zoning that memorializes what the court had told us back in 2008. That's what this is supposed to do. I'm going to shut up right now. John, you want to?
Yeah. Briefly, in 2007, ordered settlement. That court-ordered settlement stipulated that there would be continuous cleanup. The developer would receive flexibility to put in these flexible office warehouse units. And the third element of that was there be senior housing. In terms of the memorialization of that court-ordered settlement, there are some inconsistencies that were in this 60-page document that the planner has worked on to address. One was the age of senior housing. Number two was the location, the specific location of the buildings. And the third is the yard requirements based upon the specific location of those buildings. My commentary is in regards to the definition of senior housing. Senior housing, from my perspective and many other members of this committee, to include Mr. Capola, is that senior housing, our interpretation of it as we read this document, would be 62-plus years of age. These are the individuals who would be most benefit from receiving this opportunity for housing. So with that, I just wanted to let everybody know that that's something we would support. We might not be able to accomplish that very issue tonight, but we will be moving in that direction.
On that note, as the administrator said, and as the vote did state, the floor is now open. If anyone from the public would like to comment on the ordinance, they may do so. 44-14, giving us your name and address for the record.
Good evening, Joseph Mahalko, 12 Anna Terrace, Whippany section of Hanover Township. The Township Committee has fought long and hard to win a court settlement that was signed off on by both parties. Both parties consented to that court order. Both parties should fulfill their objectives to that court order. I fully support the Township Committee approving, as read tonight, and am totally in favor of supporting that, and would ask that a response letter to the threatening letter sent to us by Riverwalk attorney be responded in kind by our attorney Fred, that there are places that letter that they sent can go that need not see the light of day.
Joe, thank you very much for that comment, and certainly thank you for the support on this. It's very important for members of the Township Committee to assure the public of what's going on here. It's a complex matter over so many years, back and forth on this property. As you and I probably have followed it, and I know Bob has, started off with an award of 750,000 square feet of office buildings back in the early 70s. Then it traded off into a town center with some 1,500 housing units, I might add, at that town center zoning. And then finally traded off to an approval of the flex buildings, which was challenged in court, and this leading to this settlement, which again, we're all here tonight to memorialize as we go. Would anyone else like to be heard at this time?
Robert Steiger, 13 Quarter Place, Cedar Knolls. I appreciate your wisdom on the senior housing. Age restricted is not senior housing, as we well know. My other question is, would that be the only portion of the property that would be considered mixed use? The mixed use would not, the entire property would not be mixed use, would? Okay.
No, it's matter of fact, Bob, you know what, I can give up this drawing.
I saw those plans many moons ago.
It's that portion of the property above the dam.
Right.
But toward the lagoons.
Right.
It would accept two buildings.
Right.
It would, my guesstimate based upon this would be that, there would be some 50 units in each building.
Right.
To make up the two buildings, and then an additional 24 affordables just on the other side of the track.
Right.
Yeah.
My other thing that I'm happy with, did you say that actually the land southeast of the Whippany River would be donated to the town, the old sewer plant property?
There is exactly a piece of buffer property. I don't know if you could see it. What I'm talking about is what you're talking about.
Right.
This piece along the river here.
Where river separates it
is all buffer.
And that's fantastic, because that was open space is #1 priority to try to obtain that property. That's wonderful. That really and truly is. I fully support the ordinance. I really and truly do. I think it's good for the town, and it'll be good for some of our seniors. I hope they would take advantage of it. The affordable, most of our seniors don't qualify for,
Sure.
but that's only a small portion of it.
Sure.
Thank you.
Bob. Appreciate that. Once again, the floor is open. Anyone like to be heard at this time?
Good evening, Lisa and John Tracy, 38 Legion Place in Whippany. Lived there for over 25 years now. And we received the notice in the mail. And we have a question about Legion Place, referenced here as included in the TC area. I want to comment that that is a very quiet residential street, a dead-end street. Across the street directly from us are woods, which is a nice break from the Pine Plaza, which is behind us, and the Legion Place down the street. So I can't tell from the document if the TC applies to that area. It looks like it does, but on your map, I see it's got a little bit different color coding, and would like to understand what is allowed in that space, 41 through 49 Legion Place.
The portion that you're talking about, which parallels Legion, and that is earmarked for 20 affordable units, and 20 affordable units in the Council of Affordable Housing's language are those units that comply with low and moderate incomes people. Now, 20 units can take the form of a one building, 20 units can take the form of several small townhouse type units, et cetera, but they are designed for and designated as low and moderate. In order to live in those units, you must comply with or meet certain standards of income for families of 4, 2, et cetera. So that's what that, but it is residential.
Well, I'd like to comment that we're completely opposed to that sort of concept, and I think for two reasons. Number one, the idea of affordable or lower income housing in itself is a subject that's not quite so acceptable. But beyond that, from a common sense point of view, I think it's clear to say that if you look at the properties involved here, you've got a big, low, flat, open sort of tract of land, which is where the majority of all the proposals would take place. And above that, across the street from our home, you've got a raised wooded area, in other words, on the other side of the railroad tracks, in essence. So to me, it would make nothing but common sense to leave the existing wooded area alone as a buffer. It geographically is set up already perfectly for that. It's much higher than the lower area on the other side of the railroad tracks. It's in a residential street with nothing but houses other than the American Legion and the cemetery. So to me, I think that that area, geographically speaking and conceptually speaking, in all practical terms, should remain a buffer zone and separate the neighborhood from whatever industrial and commercial properties eventually get in place below it.
I would also recommend just taking a ride. If you're not familiar with Legion Place, it's hard to see the scale from a map like this, at least for us. I can tell you, having lived there for 25 years, it's really not that wide of a space. And so when we first heard about the concept of some dense housing being placed there, we couldn't conceive of it. It just doesn't seem large enough. And I would ask you to take a ride over there, take a look yourself, and imagine what would happen to the character of the street as that sort of housing in a dense format matches the rest of the houses on the street. I think it would look very out of character.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a strange piece of property. You know, it's a weird shape. It's got an extremely high backdrop because we walk there all the time, and you have to literally pick and choose where you could even have access down to the railroad tracks. It's quite a big drop off. So to me, again, it just seems like it's a natural boundary, if you would, that would be best served.
Additional buffer area?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's our comments.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can you tell us if there is any way that this could be amended to exclude that area?
I think that at any point, ordinances can be reviewed and amended. There's no question about that. I think that the 20 units, by the way, that we've already taken responsibility for and what's known as our housing plan as part of our code, because Hanover is in the most admirable position now of having little or no COA requirements, something like under 9, I think, Blaze, something like that in the requirement. But going back to this particular piece of land, it would not be it would not be unheard of to accommodate the 20 units, 10 and 10, in the two buildings that they're talking about with the seniors, in the seniors area, where they're talking about 50 units, 50 units. I can't really speak to that. That would have to be something that planner would have to take a look at.
Would that
But what I can tell you is that, ordinances, are subject to review and are subject to change. We would like to move forward on this for all the correct reasons, but I would suggest that the planner take your suggestion under consideration and give you a reply on that.
So to understand it, again, to make sure we're clear on it, the only thing right now in the proposal that is in this wooded area across the street from our home on Legion Place would be this low-income housing project, correct?
Yes, that's correct. Yes. Where this plan is concerned, yes.
Well, I would, again, strongly recommend and suggest that that be relocated within either the other apartment buildings or the other larger tract of land. That would be my wish and my wife's wish, and I'm sure everyone else that lives on our streets wish.
I think the building envelope on this, Blaze, was very narrow too, wasn't it?
There are setbacks proposed in the ordinance of 50 feet from the street and 50 feet from the side property line.
Yeah.
It's not a huge building envelope, but there are provisions for buffers and there are provisions for setbacks.
Once you take the buffers into account, it's hard to believe there's enough space almost left to put anything. So again, to reconstruct and knock down all the trees and dismantle this natural buffer to basically drop something in a small downscaled size just to accommodate it from a reasonable, logical point of view, I think is not logical.
I can assure you we can take a look at it and we'll take it into consideration.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
For sure.
And Mayor, may I just
Thank you.
add one thing?
Fred?
This has a long history. This track has been really, in this state since the 1980s. And so I don't think tomorrow anything will happen, but the history to it is, and the mayor was there, we went out, we walked Legion Place at the time we tried to resolve this because the property owner wanted 1,000 residential units. And, that by any score would be just too much. And so what happened was, as part of the settlement, this was a component. And there was even attempts to try to have them dedicate that aspect of Legion Place to the township. It didn't come through. But I think along the lines of what the mayor said, look, you already heard the developer is against the settlement they already entered into. So, perhaps there's a lot of steps that would have to take place before they ever suddenly change their mind and get started. But the things in the township's favor and your favor are, as the mayor said, at the time the settlement was entered into, the affordable housing needs of the township may have been different than they are now. They're better now. There's more compliance. And secondly, if there is a developer that comes forward, it's good the township committee knows your concerns because there may be an opportunity down the road to convey that and look out for that. So this is something that I've recommended to the committee that they do this because there was a settlement, but it doesn't mean that there's not a number of steps in between. This is probably, this wasn't the centerpiece of the settlement. It was for them to build their flex buildings and for the township to get a reasonable number of senior housing that it wanted. And this was something that is a component. So I think down the road, there's been so much dialogue over the years. If it should happen again, I think it's good that the committee knows that, so.
Yeah, and I'm sure that we, in that context could get our fellow neighbors. There's a number of rental properties, and so maybe the landlords, owners of the properties aren't present tonight, but I'm sure we could represent other than our own position on that, other people on the street as well in a future meeting or hearing. But again, thank you.
I thank you for your comments. I think the Township Committee is very aware of the character of that street, and there's no doubt that should, for whatever reason, developer or someone come forward on this piece. I think the Township Committee would take a very careful and close look at the zoning there, I assure you that. And we'll comment, we'll have our planner comment on the suggestion of a buffer in there. Good, thank you for your comments.
Robert Steiger again. The gentleman kind of referred to the low and moderate income housing. If he wanted to know what low and moderate senior housing looks like, come over to Cedar Knolls and see the beautiful complex that was put in there, and much larger than would ever go where they are, because there must be 100 units there, and where there's only going to be 20 or so. It's gorgeous property, and they make the nicest they're seniors, and they don't cause much trouble, I can tell you that
Talking about
right
Boulevard Road.
Yeah, Boulevard Road, and it is really beautiful. You should take a look at it, really. After 8 o'clock, there's no noises whatsoever.
They're all eating supper at 4 o'clock, too. Tom Amadusi, 27 Mountain Avenue, Cedar Knolls, New Jersey. I have property on 8 Roslyn Road. I own an industrial building there for 40 years. I'm just concerned, the ordinance states that the only truck entrance to this new town center property will be through either Apollo Drive or Roslyn Road. I'm concerned because my building is directly on Roslyn Road, approximately 10 feet off the side of the road. Roslyn Road is probably a 20-foot wide road. To develop that road into a passable road for this purpose would certainly put my building in jeopardy, I feel. I do feel Apollo Drive, which is an improved road, approximately 35 feet wide, curved, and then would be the most practical source to access that property. I just didn't know what the intent, what the committee intends, what the planning folks intend to do with those two roads. Is one more favorable than the other at this point in time, or I know we've talked about this for many years when the ordinance was introduced in 2004, and it's 10 years later now, so we're still kind of up in the air about it. But I just wonder if there's any more further thoughts about the improvement of Roslyn Road versus the use of Apollo Drive as the main entrance.
I think, Tom, that the Township Committee early on, in considering this property for so many other uses, looked at the viability of opening both roads, and they're both possible to do. Only issue with Apollo, and it's not really a critical issue, is that our suggestion would have meant some takings of one particular property owner along the way who was resistant to that. But that's minor in the scope of what would have to happen if we wanted to open that road. On the other hand, Roslyn Road, private street right now, would have to be widened, considerable taking on both sides, as you know. We would have to get over the railroad tracks to get in there. That's already been discussed in an agreement that we had through the railroad and DOT some years ago for crossing those tracks, so that's not an impediment. There is some cleanup that very shortly is going to go underway with the U.S. Radium across the street from you. Van Dyke, I'm sorry, Van Dyke. And that's being taken care of as we speak, worked on as we speak. So that's also a viable connection. But I can't really tell you at this point, without somebody coming forward, without the River Park people, without the new family coming forward with a development for this, consistent with the court settlement, how we would handle the street accesses. But you and I agree on one thing: they are going to need to get out of there in another way, other than just Eden Lane. There's been talks about some building of a bridge over Eden Lane by the Eden Lane condominium development there too. A very expensive undertaking that has to be looked at. But those are site plan items, further down the road. So at this particular point, we just want to get the zone straightened out, and then see how the pieces fall from here.
Well, for the record, I am in favor of this ordinance, so that's not an issue. I think it's about time we did something. That's true. I planted the trees on Jefferson Road in 2004 because they didn't like the way it looked going into the town center, and they're now mature trees that are ready to fall over from a lightning storm. So that's 10 years, like you say. So I'm in favor of it. I just didn't know if there's any further information on my road, so thank you for.
Thanks a lot, Tom.
In place, Whippany. And I have the same thoughts as my neighbors at 38 Legion. I'm opposed to having housing across the street. I don't think it's feasible, just the way as the gentleman was saying, the way it slopes down. But my other concern, if that were to pass, I can't tell from this map here, the entrance through Rosin Road, would that road be going all the way to Legion Place to get to the industrial area as well as to the housing on Legion Place?
What you're looking at, are you talking about
My recollection,
no,
Mayor, is
Rosin Road wouldn't reach what you're talking about. Are you looking at the railroad tracks that define the edge of the property?
Not even Apollo Drive.
I don't know, I can't tell from this thing.
Yeah.
It's not in color.
Neither of those roads would go to Legion Place.
Yeah. It wouldn't be connected to
not at all.
Legion Place. If that even occurred, it would not be connected.
So there wouldn't be a road, thank you, there wouldn't be a road going through there.
For the industrial use and things of that nature would not exist. No.
Not even close.
Well, I also want to go on the record as saying I'm opposed to the housing on Legion Place. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Judy, how you doing?
I'm okay, how are you? Merry Christmas.
Good. Merry Christmas.
Judy Irati, 43 Locust Drive in Hanover Township. I agree with Mr. Amaducci and Mr. Mahalko and Mr. Steiger. I think this ordinance, from what the description of the difference is a very positive thing for this piece of property, the development of this piece of property, and I'm totally in agreement with it. Given that, perhaps a suggestion might be, when this was introduced, if all of these reasonings had been presented to the public, it would have prevented a lot of angst among residents in township. So we'd like to get information up front rather than waiting for the adoption. Maybe when an ordinance is introduced, like I said, if you had given all the reasons for it, it's just like a no-brainer. I mean, it's a great for the town. And
Judy,
overdue.
I just want to comment, though, the process requires, under the municipal land use law, in order to get those reasons to the forefront to the township committee, it must first go to the planning board, and as recited in the letter that I read into the record,
Okay.
those are the reasons that we can present to the public. So what you're saying is, go backwards and present the reasons before the planning board has an opportunity to review it. The planning board has got to do their review first.
Okay, so in the sequence of things, the township would introduce it, send it to the planning board?
That's correct.
And then come back. Okay, that's very reasonable.
That's the process.
Okay, that sounds very reasonable. And the other thing, I think that the by the low-income housing, I think a better thing would be to integrate low-income housing with market value housing. It makes a better mix. But also, I believe that even without putting this ordinance through, I think that allows for the low-income housing at that location right now. Is that correct, Blaze? The current ordinance, without even putting this one through?
The town center zone does not provide specifically for affordable housing. It provides for housing, but not affordable housing.
And it never specified that position for low-income housing?
There's no mention in the existing town center zone of affordable housing,
Oh,
just
okay.
housing.
Okay, so these other residents that, putting the ordinance through tonight is a really good thing, but to look at it as soon as you can to see if we can't integrate the housing with the, like you said, the senior housing, or in one location, and because that spot is a really terrible spot for anybody to live in. You don't want to segregate low-income housing people in a terrible location either. So, thank you.
If I could just add,
Yes.
please, the affordable housing obligation of the township now it's very good compared to what it was
Yes,
then.
but that includes the site.
Right.
That
But
assumes
it
that the
includes it.
site is developed.
But one of the things during the settlement negotiations was, that very question was asked. It would seem to make sense to, as you said, integrate.
Sure.
And in the negotiations, that was not accepted.
Great.
But on the other hand, it's more costly for the developer. And we
Sure.
didn't understand that.
Sure.
Because it's going to be more costly. You could build this all at once. The second thing is, I would think, not to say the committee would be for or against it or anything like that. It's a little easier now if going forward, the developer comes forward and wants to negotiate that. It's sort of separate and apart, and maybe it could be an item that would get changed. And I think tonight the point was made so that if the developer comes forward, the governing body knows that, you know, that location is something in the back of everyone's mind to put out there. But it
Great.
did come forward at the time, long time ago,
Yes,
but
long
that
time
very
ago.
question, yeah.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
It makes good sense, and I think the committee is all looking at the same maps, obviously are, that if that property could be given up to a buffer or open space, et cetera, in perpetuity, that's it. But again, we've already counted those 20 units in our COA, against our COA obligation. So we would have to relocate them. Is that possible? Sure. So I think that's exactly what I told our neighbors earlier. What we would have to do is take a close look and see whether or not, you just heard council say that at the time of the settlement, we were not in favor of integrating them. That doesn't mean that, you know, if a satisfactory way of integration could come about, we wouldn't do it. We would, but let's take a look at it. Again, I like the idea that we're way out in front of this now. I mean, some of the conversations and some of the thoughts that I'm hearing right now are on the assumption that someone's going to walk through that door and want building permits. You know, but let's see what River Parks Council's next response is to us before we get to that point. You know.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you, Judy. Hey, Michael.
Good evening. Michael Mahalko, 7 Nye Avenue, Hanover Township. I'm a former resident of Legion Place, and I live directly across the street from where we're talking about. I agree fully with the Tracys that it needs to be looked at. And I know that's going to be when somebody's got to propose something first before we can start commenting on it.
Right.
But I know when you get to that point and you take a look at it, you'll see exactly what they're talking about. Housing is going to be pretty tricky right there. On the surface, this sounds like a great idea. My question is, by changing the zoning, does this open the floodgate to further negotiation? Right now, it's 120 housing. Now, is this going to make it easier down the road for them to say, well, it's 120, but we'll do 200? Does that make it easier, harder?
Council will slap my fingers if I get out of line here.
That's what he's there for.
When you say changing the zoning, I think we're looking at it from a different side of the desk. We're looking at it from the standpoint that we're now creating zoning consistent with the court order of 2008.
Right.
So are we changing the zoning? No, we're making the court order of 2008 legitimate with the zoning. This is what River Park is involved with right now, is challenging the zoning. As you've heard the language, they say we've abandoned this, so therefore,
Right.
let's come back for what we want.
Right, so obviously they're going to counter, they're going to try to negotiate.
We're saying, yeah, now I can't say that from a legal standpoint, again, that's why Mr. Sumrau sits here, that, they're not going to attack this from some other vantage point, but I don't think from the one you're proposing is that we're changing the zoning, so are we throwing it open? I think what we're doing here is solidifying, assuring that we've got a position.
Yeah.
And I think this can make you feel better, and that is, first of all, for the past, from 2008, when the settlement was reached and signed, through almost a year, through this year, the property owner did come back with various proposals over the years and had various meetings with officials to no avail. You know, the settlement is what the governing body has stood by. And, one clear sign is, although there was a protest written by the property owner, if there's a settlement, and now the property owner is saying, we don't like this settlement, we oppose it, it must mean, on the other hand, if Hanover Township is taking the position it's a settlement we need to go forward with, sounds to me like that's a response that says the door hasn't been opened. Because if they thought it would open the door, we wouldn't have that protest letter. It's not every day.
I just
that
wanna make sure
A
that-
developer comes forward and says, no, we don't want our settlement now.
Right.
We don't want it. Well, that's because maybe the terms are very fair and from my perspective, favorable to the township.
Right.
And, it's a good settlement from that standpoint.
Yeah, I agree with it also. I think it'll be a good use for the space, short of maybe the town stepping in and buying it and making it something, parks or whatever. Obviously, that's expensive and whatever, but, yeah, that was my concern is, does this open the floodgate? Does this, you know, will they have to come back in front of you guys again if they want to change it?
It's not unlike their, this is what they're attempting to do.
Right.
This is what they're attempting to do.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Who was the attorney on this? Was that Judge Bazanelis?
Judge Bazanelis was
Judge
the
Bazanelis?
judge that we were in front of.
God bless him.
I only take a moment. The land that the township would get, that we talked about for the open space where the sewer plant was?
The treatment plant?
Yeah,
Yeah.
the town would receive, we would no way be attached with the state or anything like Green Acres, because if they get it, we can't even touch it. It would be something that if we want, it would be totally ours, and we could do with it as we wish, right?
The only way that would happen, Bob, and the administrator will correct me, is if we took Green Acres money.
Right,
And or
that's what
grant
I
money or
understand.
funding, then it would go in the Rossi.
Right, yeah.
Can't touch
Would
it.
That's what
be
we don't want to
restricted in
happen.
perpetuity.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what we don't want to happen.
Right.
Because most of the land that we have now, we can't do anything unless they agree to it. Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
No, absolutely. Once you take federal or county funding in that fashion, then it's theirs. It's theirs. Anyone else would like to be heard at this time?
Jim Neidhart, 3414 Appleton Way, Whippany, New Jersey. First of all, I'd like to speak in support of the ordinance. I think it's very well thought out, and I'm 100% behind it. Second, I'd just like to make a clarification, since a number of residents had referred to properties as low income. These areas are affordable income, and the affordable income units have two components, a low income and a moderate income. And if you ever saw the amount of money you're allowed to make to qualify for a moderate, particularly when you have 3 bedrooms, you'd be shocked. It's well in excess of $50,000 a year. So they're not, it's not like you're getting some really, really low-end riffraff with those type units. It's a combination. The third thing, which I heard tonight for the first time, and I know this is way off the road, but there was a comment that at some point there might be some consideration of a bridge going over to Eden Lane out of this development. I would strongly be against such a bridge. Eden Lane from Jefferson Road almost all the way to Whippany Road is an extremely quiet street. It has virtually nothing on it but trees and the river up until you get to two entranceways to the Eden Lane complex. Eden Lane is a very high elevation area, so both entrances go up through a wooded or flowered area before it gets there. So it's extremely, extremely quiet. 298 units in there in the Eden Lane complex, but a very quiet development. And the pool for that community is at the very front end, right by one of the entrances, and it would be horrible to have industrial warehousing, trucking coming over by way of a bridge right in front of the quiet elevated pool area right there. So I would be strongly against that if that came to pass. Just as some people spoke in terms of the logic of keeping residential units with residential units, I would think industrial traffic should exit through an industrial area, such as Apollo Drive and the like, not onto a beautiful, quiet Eden Lane that has a portion of Patriots Path going through it. A lot of the people from Bayer, and I suspect MetLife, at lunchtime come and they have a nice quiet walk there. People walk their dogs there. It's a walking path down to Central Park and the like. and having industrial traffic empty out onto that street. I'll get you the majority of the 298 families here if you go and propose that.
Now,
So,
Mr. Neidhart, you're, that it's a component of our connectivity plan. And it's something that we look forward to seeing that being implemented. We're working very closely with the Parks Commission and the county to affect that, so I think your logic is.
To affect
sound.
building the bridge from the,
No, to affect building the connectivity.
oh, okay.
Before this settlement, and one of us on this committee had the opportunity to be involved in that settlement back then, the idea of a bridge for the flex building traffic going over in Ely was vetoed. And the idea of that bridge, the reason it was vetoed was precisely the argument that you just gave. We feel that Rosin Road and or Apollo going on to Jefferson Road, bringing truck traffic out to Route 10 and then the highways is the proper way to go. And at that time, there was Deputy Mayor John Tort was on the board and argued very strongly against no access onto Eden Lane from truck traffic. So we will try and stay consistent with that.
The other practical matter is that if you gave them an out in the middle of Eden Lane, that would give them the option of turning left and going to Whippany Road, and then creating even more havoc to an area that's one of the worst areas in town. So another reason not to do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Anyone else at this time would like to be heard? If not, seeing none, hearing none, motion to close?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Gentlemen, on the vote?
Mr. Mayor, we're waiting for a resolution to memorialize the reasons of the planning board, so Mr. Branchow is just about ready to present that. Thank you, Mr. Branchow.
If the governing body is in favor of this ordinance, then there needs to be a resolution first to adopt to support the reasons. So I would just ask Mayor informally if the consensus is in favor of the ordinance, and if that be the case, then we would formally adopt the resolution and formally adopt the ordinance.
Language for the resolution? Yeah. Okay, Administrator, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Whereas the Township Committee has introduced Ordinance 44-14, which ordinance would amend the Town Center Zone regulations by providing an alternative development option in the zone. And whereas the Township Committee has referred Ordinance 44-14 to the Planning Board as required by the Municipal Land Use Law at NJSA 40:55D-26A. And whereas the Planning Board has indicated that Ordinance number 44-14 is partially consistent and partially inconsistent with the master plan. And whereas the Municipal Land Use Law provides that the governing body, when adopting a zoning ordinance that is inconsistent with the master plan, set forth its reasons for so acting in a resolution, and that it records such reasons in its minutes. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Township Committee of the Township of Hanover in the County of Morrison, State of New Jersey, the governing body gives the following reasons for adopting Ordinance 44-14, notwithstanding inconsistency of ordinance with land use plan element of the master plan. 1. The ordinance is inconsistent with the housing plan element of the master plan, assists in addressing township's affordable housing obligation. 2. The ordinance addresses township's zoning obligation in a 2000 court settlement. 3. Ordinance adds an alternative development option to the current zone. Flex warehousing uses are consistent with the historic use of the property and with the industrial zone uses to the west of South Jefferson Road. And although the Town Center Zone was adopted in 2004, the property in the zone has not redevelopment in the following 10 years since. Therefore, an alternative development scheme is reasonable to consider. In fact, the property has been dormant for 25 years and this ordinance will encourage redevelopment of the significant tract of land. May we have a motion to approve the resolution?
So moved.
So moved by Mr. Faramaska, seconded by Mr. Francioli, and roll call, Mr. Gallagher.
Aye.
Mr. Faramaska.
Aye.
Mr. Bruno.
Aye.
Mr. Capola.
Aye.
And Mr. Francioli.
Aye.
Now, on adoption of the ordinance, be it resolved that an ordinance entitled, an ordinance of the Township Committee of the Township of Hanover, amending and supplementing Chapter 166 of the Code, entitled Land Use and Development Legislation, by adding an alternative mixed-use development option for the TC Town Center Zone District, be passed on final reading, and that a notice of the final passage of the ordinance be published in the December 31st, 2014 issue of the Daily Record in accordance with law. May we now have a motion on adoption?
So moved.
So moved by Mr. Faramaska, seconded by Mr. Gallagher. A roll call for adoption. Mr. Gallagher.
Aye.
Mr. Faramaska.
Aye.
Mr. Bruno.
Aye.
Mr. Capola.
Yeah, I would like to, before I say yes, I would like to say thank you to our administrator, mayor, attorney, and our planner. We had a lot of emails going around, and they certainly did an excellent job of explaining this to us in the meeting prior to coming out here this evening. I also want to thank Committeeman Faramaska for clarifying the portion on the age restriction. And with that, yes.
Thank you. And Mr. Francioli.
Aye.
So adopted unanimously.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Good night,
Merry
Bob.
Christmas, Bob.
Bob, it's not 8 o'clock,
Merry
Bob.
Christmas.
Bob, it's after 8.
Okay. You have another,
We do.
yeah.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, as we sign off on this ordinance, we're going to proceed with our next ordinance for public hearing and consideration of adoption. It's docketed as ordinance 45-14, amending and supplementing section 12 of ordinance 23-2014, establishing new rates of pay for the performance of off-duty side job assignments performed by members of the Hanover Township Police Department. We have the proof of publication that the ordinance and the notice of introduction appeared in full in the December 15th issue of the Daily Record. At this time, may we have a motion to convene the public hearing?
So moved.
So moved by
Second.
Mr. Capola, seconded by Mr. Bruno. On roll call, Mr. Gallagher.
Aye.
Mr. Faramaska.
Aye.
Mr. Bruno.
Aye.
Mr. Capola.
Aye.
And Mr. Francioli.
Aye.
Is there anyone in chambers wishing to be heard concerning ordinance number 45-14? Seeing none, hearing none, we have a motion to
Second.
close the public hearing by Mr. Capola, seconded by Mr. Bruno. On roll call to close the public hearing, Mr. Gallagher.
Aye.
Mr. Faramaska.
Aye.
Mr. Bruno.
Aye.
Mr. Capola.
Aye.
And Mr. Francioli.
Aye.
Now, on adoption, be it resolved that an ordinance of the Township Committee of the Township of Hanover, amending and supplementing Section 12 of Ordinance Number 23-2014, by establishing new rates of pay for the performance of off-duty side job assignments performed by members of the Hanover Township Police Department, be passed on final reading, and that a notice of the final passage of the ordinance be published in the December 31st issue of the Daily Record in accordance with law. May we have a motion on adoption?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Capola, seconded by Mr. Francioli. And roll call for adoption. Mr. Gallagher.
Aye.
Mr. Faramaska.
Aye.
Mr. Bruno.
Aye.
Mr. Capola.
Aye.
And Mr. Francioli.
Aye.
So adopted. And ladies and gentlemen, we will proceed in one moment for the consent agenda. Next one, thank you. Okay, on the consent agenda, ladies and gentlemen, we do have two additional resolutions that do not appear on your agenda, and I will read the titles of those resolutions into the record. The first is a resolution of the Township Committee authorizing the execution of a quitclaim deed for property located at 1294 Route 10, also known as Block 3301, Lot 2. And the second resolution is a resolution of the Township Committee adopting a Township of Hanover Parent Spectator Code of Conduct for all athletic and sports activities hosted by the township or not hosted by the township. This is inclusive of all activities. Maybe Mr. Bruno might want to comment on that.
Yeah, just to expand for a second, we wanted to make the code of conduct uniform. Right now, we have several different governments per sport. Little League has their own committee and commission, and football has theirs, and then there's some sports that essentially report directly to the Recreation Commission. So this will make it uniform, and I think what we're saying, really to summarize, is we do expect not just the parents, but all spectators that are involved with youth sports to be on good behavior. But more importantly, if they're not, this now gives us the leverage and authority to deal with them accordingly. There was another layer, there was a little cloud of confusion prior to doing this, and that's really what we're setting out to accomplish, that if we feel someone has acted inappropriately, this gives us the authority to take action as opposed to going through another commission and another layer of authority first. We can take action immediately. And again, the intent here is to prevent fans, spectators from being out of control at a kid's sporting event.
Thank you, Mr. Bruno.
You're welcome.
Are there any questions from members of the governing body concerning any of the resolutions as a consent agenda?
Motion for adoption.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Francioli, seconded by Mr. Ferramaska. On roll call for the approval of the consent agenda with the two additional resolutions. Mr. Gallagher.
Aye.
Mr. Ferramaska. Aye. Mr. Bruno.
Aye.
Mr. Capola.
Aye.
And Mr. Francioli.
Aye.
So approved and adopted. And then the consent agenda for the two raffle applications. Any questions?
Move that we
We
approve.
have a motion by Mr. Capola.
Second.
Second by Mr. Bruno. And roll call, Mr. Gallagher.
Aye.
Mr. Ferramaska.
Aye.
And Mr. Capola. And Mr. Francioli.
Aye.
So approved. And the payment of bills, $529,515.11.
Oh, gee.
Got off cheap.
So moved.
We have a motion by Mr. Ferramaska, seconded by Mr. Capola, and roll call, Mr. Gallagher.
Aye.
Mr. Ferramaska.
Aye.
Mr. Bruno.
Aye.
Mr. Capola.
Aye.
And Mr. Francioli.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Township Committee, I thank you and wish you a Merry Christmas, Happy New Year to everyone present. And that clears the agenda. The Business Administrator, Township Clerk, I thank you again.
Thank you, Joseph, appreciate it. And I thank everybody for their indulgence and patience this evening, an important matter of 4414. Is there any other business from the Township Committee?
Real quick from our Department of Public Works, we will be collecting garbage on Wednesday, which is Christmas Eve, as scheduled. Thursday, there will be no pickup. If you were scheduled for Thursday, that'll take place on Friday. Likewise, next week for New Year's Day, no garbage pickup, but the pickup will take place on Friday. Now that we're going to once a week, we're not skipping days anymore, so rest assured, garbage pickup will take place. And just like the mayor, I want to wish everybody the happiest of holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and we look forward to seeing everyone on January 1st.
Yep, very good. George?
Yeah, Mayor, this morning I did meet with Chief Gallagher due to the unfortunate situation that occurred recently. Together, we both felt that, we did tell the patrol staff to please be very careful. Okay, I mean, I don't think we can be excluded that, not to worry about anything, and it can happen anywhere. So, I know everyone has a heartfelt sorrow for what took place, and we ask that everyone please be careful. So we are taking precautionary steps. And with that, I too wish everyone a very Merry Christmas, happy, healthy, and a blessed New Year. See you on the 1st.
12 noon.
12 noon.
Thanks, George. Tom?
I just want to say Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to everybody. This is the close of my first year as a committeeman. And I want to say that the last 8 to 10 days working with my fellow committeemen, our residents, Fred and legal over this ordinance 44-14. Everybody was great, very patient. Being the newest guy on the block, I had quite a bit of catch up to do. But it was great working with you guys this year. I think next year is going to be even better. And thanks for everything, and thanks for everybody for coming out, and I hope you have a great, safe holiday.
Oh, very nice, Tom, very nice. John?
No, I just want to echo the feelings of the committee, wishing everybody here a very Merry Christmas and a happy and healthy New Year.
Very good.
And a happy Hanukkah to all our Jewish friends.
And a happy Hanukkah to all our Jewish friends belatedly.
I apologize for any confusion on that sanitation pickup. I've been getting some phone calls. I think Bob straightened it out. We had a little confusion on our 2014 calendar. You should have all gotten your 2015 calendar for sanitation. But again, if you're a Wednesday pickup, tomorrow, Wednesday and next Wednesday before the New Year's, you're going to have your regular pickup. If your pickup is on a Thursday, it will just be the following Friday. So again, and I echo all of the greetings of our Township Committee for you to have a wonderful, wonderful Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy New Year, enjoy the holidays, be safe, and we look forward to seeing you noontime here, January 1st. For Reorganization Day. The Township Committee will reorganize at that time. Any appointments, new appointments and reappointments will be announced at that day too at the same time. So we hope to all see you here. It'll be followed by a lovely luncheon afterwards, compliments of your Township Committee, and thank you all very much. Motion to open the floor once again.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, the floor is again open, giving us your name and address for the record.
Gentlemen, Joseph Mahalko, 12 Anna Terrace, Whippany section of Hanover Township. I'd like to congratulate all of you on your actions this evening. It has been a most pleasurable experience for me to have ended this year on such a high note. I just caution you now that I will probably be absent for the next 3 months. It seems that there's some sunshine calling me. And my wife said that we must go down and enjoy it. However, I would leave you with one note, and I hope I don't have to fly back up from Florida to address it later on. It seems that we seem to be running very positively right now. I think the town is just headed in a perfectly fine direction. As of now, from some sources, the Township of Hanover's Board of Education is in the process of trying to dispose of or utilize or gain some monetary benefit from certain pieces of property that they own. I would encourage the Township Committee to go to the land use, or what's the organization Mr. Steiger's with?
Open Space.
Open Space Committee.
Yeah.
As I understand it, we have a number of a fair amount of credit with the county open space funds, and I would hope that the Township Committee would consider availing themselves of the opportunity to perhaps work with the Board of Education to acquire the parcels of property that they wish to abandon in favor of open space for our children, for our schools, and for our community. It seems like it would be a perfect addendum to having open space near our school properties so that the community, the family communities of Hanover Township could continue to enjoy the woods and trees and everything else at probably minimal cost to the town using our land use funds. Minimal cost. I didn't say nothing. So considering all that, I wish you all a blessed New Year, a healthy and happy New Year.
Thank you, Joe. And just so you're comfortable on your way down to that sunny, wonderful, warm temperature place that you hibernate to for a few months, Township Committee has undertaken some estimates on the cost of those properties and has been having discussions about them. And if our Open Space Committee, has any suggestions, we're happy to hear those as well. But it's on our radar screen. Okay.
Just like an early Christmas present.
Merry Christmas.
Bless you all.
Take care. You stay in the best of health, my friend.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else from the Township Committee like to be heard at this time?
Hi, Judy Iradi, 43 Locust Drive, Hanover Township. And Mr. Mahalko reminded me of something. Yes, the town is going in a great direction right now. And please stay on course. And I think there's something, Mayor, that the residents may have missed when you were talking, and that's the location of the Merc in the front portion on Whippany Road of the former Lucent property. So that, I think that is a great, great addition to the town.
MetLife?
Oh, MetLife.
MetLife.
MetLife, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
I work next to Merck, MetLife.
MetLife.
So it's MetLife, not Merck,
we're
is going
very
to
excited.
relocate on that property, so that's a really great thing, and I think we're in a really good position as far as our ratables coming in. We're going in a good direction. Let's stay the course, and we'll all be happy next year. Thank you.
Thank you. We are extremely excited over MetLife, and I think I'm also safe not telling tales out of school, and I'm sure our friends at ShopRite will not be so happy with me, Fred, but Wegmans Corporation has signed their contracts to go forward on the construction, and they have emailed the same to me, so it's in print, and we're looking forward to adding that rateable on to the township as well in the days ahead. So maybe, Joe, and by the time you come back with your suntan, you know, you'll be able to see some new construction over there as well. Anyone else from?
You're all invited to come down to visit.
Anyone else to the committee, from the public would like to be heard at this time?
Motion to close.
Seeing the motion to close, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion for adjourn, all in favor?
Aye.
Adjourn. Okay. We have that? Oh, Tommy, you look good. You look good, I bet you do. You look good.
Keep up the good work.